Hey, James, how's it going?
Good. Good to be back.
You sound excited.
Yes, very excited.
Welcome back to the podcast. It's been a couple weeks, and so we wanted to get a new one out there for you guys. And we had a discussion this morning around the kitchen table and kind of came up with an idea for today. Because we're always talking business, and in the mornings, he and I sit around and talk about things. And a topic came up about, you know, pricing your materials, because we got somebody asking us, hey, I can't believe you charge that much for that product. You take it, engrave it, personalize it, fix it up. And I think they were kind of shocked at some of our pricing. And I know this discussion comes up quite a bit in the groups. And so that James and I started a discussion about that. Like, where does the mindset go of the maker, either in the side hustle or in the small business set, when you're talking about pricing? And it's kind of a topic that's like a unicorn. Everyone wants to, how do I price better? But
I think they were just cheap.
yeah, could be. But we started going back and forth, like, where does that come from? Like, why? And it really comes back to where you are in your current business model. Like, if you're in a side hustle phase, you may not be asking as much for your piece part, but if
maybe you're just getting started.
Yeah. So we thought this might be a great topic to talk about today. And so that's what we're going to bring to you, is really talking about the scrappy side hustle kind of model versus the small business, and what the differences are. And some of you are wanting to get to small business. You're in this side hustle phase. And so we think this will be some tips and helpful things to make you think about or write down that you'll need to do next. And we've got a small slide deck that we're going to use as a visual, just so that way you don't have to focus on taking notes. You can go back and watch this if you wish. But James, why don't you tell them what we've been up to this week?
Okay, well, I guess the big news is we got the color UV set up, the Mamaki. So I was really happy with that. Thanks to PDS for doing a great job there. Miles came out and did an excellent job, answered all of our questions, made sure the machine was running properly. I'm normally kind of a DIY person, and you are as well. I mean, you set up all these machines yourself, but I really like the concierge service with this one, because it's got some complexities. There was actually some software and updates, and really some, I guess, advanced alignments he needed to do on the machine, not just minor tweaks.
Yeah, it's coming straight from, I think, the factory. And so
in Japan.
Yeah, so it's like the first time you turn it on. So it was successful, and I'm playing around with it and testing certain materials, and so that's been good. But we've been busy. This first quarter was a record quarter for us. This month has been actually better than the last 3 or 4 years. So we're hustling. This, kind of side hustle.
Still somewhat scrappy.
Yeah, still somewhat scrappy, but I would classify us as a small business. And well, let's get into it. So let me bring up my slides here, and I'm going to make it a little bit more full page. So today's discussion is scrappy side hustle versus a real small business. What are those differences? And we're going to walk through them. And I'm going to move my person over here, and I'm going to turn this off. That way we can see it a little bit better. I think it's really good just to define what we're talking about here. You can see in some of the communities that we're in, some people will say they're a side hustle, but they're really a small business, and most people don't even know a true definition. So we're going to ground you on it here. And so I'll take the side hustle part. Side hustle is really, it's a part-time kind of gig, and it's often informal. It's something maybe that you're doing in addition to your day job. It's typically just yourself. And so you're doing it and starting to see if things are going to take off. You really don't have a high investment, and it's low risk. And it may not be a long-term commitment thing. You may just say, I'm going to try this for now to see if it fits. And we see a lot of people did that in the early days by getting a lower expensive laser and just seeing kind of if it takes off. An example would be somebody who's selling crafts on Etsy or a small market in their local area or something like that. And if you look down at the bottom, they typically have a general annual sales of either 1,000 to 50,000 a year. And really, like I said, it's just you. So James, hit us on the small business side.
Okay, a small business is more formal. You have a formalized structure through an LLC, S corporation, something like that. You're a legal entity. And it's typically, when you're making that business, it's your primary income. Or it could be like us, like one of us still has a day job, me, and then you run the business full time. And you've got some examples down there, but coffee shop, maybe it's consultancy firm, retail store like us, custom, gifts. And then if we want to quantify it, which I think is helpful, then your employee head count can be, 0, can just be you, or 2 or 3, and it's typically up to 500. And then the annual sales or a revenue is typically in the 50,000 plus range. I don't know. It says up to 41.5. I don't know where that comes from, but
I got this data from just a general, if you look at businesses, how do
Yeah.
you categorize? Like if you were looking at Finance 101, this is how they would kind of categorize you as a small business, medium, or large. So it's kind of a general, but
okay, fair enough.
but I think it's nice to get a grounding there, because what happens is you have a different mindset when you go from side hustle to small business. And we for sure did. When we said, I'm going to quit my day job full time. Now we're going to do business. And we had our strategic plan ready to go. We targeted certain things. So there's certain actions that you might do differently than you would as a side hustle.
There's a lot. I mean, we had to go out and get licensing. We had to get insurance. We had to spend money on marketing, accounting.
So I'll hit the side hustle part, but let's kind of what you're talking about, legally structuring your business when you're one or the other. When you're a side hustle, it's kind of a little bit loose, or not kind of, but it can be. You usually operate as a sole proprietorship, and then often without formal registration. And I see a lot of people in the groups are not registered as resale with their state entities. And that hurts them because they can't get wholesale accounts, and so you may not be registered. You may not have a certain account set up differently. You may be operating out of your own personal income, and who knows if you're reporting it on your taxes. Some do, some don't. You should be, but most
Well, you can't
aren't.
even bid on certain work, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so don't lose that thought, because that's a
Sure.
good thing to think about later. So tell us the legal structures for a small business.
Okay, small business, they're typically LLCs or S corporations. There's some other entities you can file with. You can get with your lawyer on that. And as you said, you've got to have that to comply with regulations. And if you don't have it, you can't grow because you can't bid on certain work. And then you're going to need licenses and permits. When we go to these shows, we have to show that we're licensed to sell the likeness or the school, those kind of things to engrave that. You also have an EIN, an employee identification number, and that has to do with your tax structure.
Yeah, and you can either get an EIN number, which is, we have an LLC, which they cut us an EIN for tax purposes, but we operate our Pate Ranch Creations under the umbrella of the LLC. So I won't get too detailed there, but we have one LLC at a higher level, and then we have a DBA for the Pate Ranch Creations part. And so you can either get the LLC with the EIN, or you can operate with your social security number, but your accountant or your lawyer can help you out with that. But these two differences really are what, in my mind, make up a side hustle and a real business. Because as you said, there's certain places that we've had to show that we have an LLC, and that when we've purchased stuff for the business, when we put a truck on our business, we had to show all that documentation. I don't think they would let us do that if it was just a side hustle with non-EIN. So it's got some different categories there.
And you're going to depreciate this equipment, so it has to be under the company name. So you have to have a structure.
And I don't have all the details, but a lot of people will try to do side hustle and try to depreciate and try to do tax stuff, and it's like you really can't do that.
No.
So,
Again, you can get with your lawyer and your CPA on that to get the details.
So what we did with these slides is we broke down some basic areas just to talk about. I think there's like 10 in here, and one of them is overhead costs. So I'm going to always hit the side hustle part and pass the ball over to the fence to him. But for overhead costs, when you're a side hustle, it's significantly different. It's typically very small. When we first started, we were in a room in our house when we lived in the Houston area. So
we started in the garage, remember?
Yeah, we did. We started in the garage woodworking, and then we went to a room, kept the garage. Then we went to the 2 rooms and the garage. Then we went to 2 rooms and a dining room as a side hustle. And so we let it kind of take over our house. So the key thing is you really don't have a lot with space. You don't have to. I mean, a lot of people I know are running this out of 1 bedroom, and it could be a business out of 1 bedroom, but you get different tax benefits if that's the case. Your supplies and things like that, you're typically not investing a ton of stuff because You don't
have
know if
huge
it's gonna,
stock. Well, you don't
yeah.
have huge stock too.
Yeah, and your business is it's smaller and you don't have maybe as much money to go invest. You're using existing resources like your own personal laptop or car, which is what we were doing, right? And let's see, example would be a freelance graphic designer might only pay for design software subscription. So you'll start seeing that on the side hustle side, you're not really dumping a lot of money into subscriptions or packages, software investments as you would on the small business side. So hit the small business side.
Okay, sure. On the small business side, you do have significant overhead. You've got to have a shop or an office, some kind of dedicated space. That can be very expensive. We elected to build our own shop. Just didn't want to go down the other route. You've got dedicated utilities. So we have that too. We have internet. We don't have phones. We use our cell phones. We do
Yeah,
have
but
cell-
our phones are under business.
yeah, cell phones under the business. We have insurance. We have taxes.
So it would be cell phones, internet. This building is
yeah.
its own dedicated internet, its own dedicated power what do you call it?
We have a separate
Utilities.
yeah,
The utilities are separate.
a separate meter. For
Separate
that.
meter for
Yeah.
this
So
building.
you have to pay to put that in up front.
Pay it in.
Yeah.
Separate insurance program for this with one vehicle on it, and then the building is paid for, so we don't have to have that. But some people would have to have either you're renting it or you're paying off the loan for the building. So you can see the difference between that side hustle and the small
Yes,
business.
and
I'll
it-
let you pick up.
Sure. And then if you have employees, of course, you have their salary, or even if they're contract, you've got to pay them. And then you've got equipment. So you have capital equipment that you're buying. You have hand tools. That's not capital, but there are things that you have to buy. You know, when you got into leatherworking, there was a lot of little hand tools there. Everything was $100, $150. That adds up. You have inventory that you have to maintain because you have a catalog. Now someone may order anything out of that catalog. So you can't typically get it just in time. And especially with the supply chain disruptions, you really, in my opinion, should have some inventory. We do have specialized software.
Yeah, we'll get into systems a little bit as we go down, but we are running a pretty big suite of software. I run all of the Adobe Creative Cloud suite for my design space, but then we also are paying subscriptions for like AI integration tools. We have what else do we pay for software wise? I've got Topaz, which is a photo cleaner upper. There's several, and that was $150. StreamYard. So you'll start having to where you need to justify.
We have some CNC software.
Yeah. So
yeah.
Key takeaway here is once your business grows into a real business, you have to have software applications and systems in place. You have to have Shopify.
Yes.
You have to have some other things. QuickBooks, that's another one, right? I mean, we got away with it on the side hustle. We were just using Excel for a while.
And you can, and then, but if you don't have these systems, you can't. I know we're going to get into this in a minute, but if you don't have these systems, then you can't grow, right? You've got to have them in place. So we do have some marketing expenses now. Most small businesses will have some web hosting service. They'll have ads, advertising, SEO. We have those now.
We've started dipping into that space. I pay ads on Etsy, and then we're doing some Google ads, and then we started optimizing our SEO to see what that looks like. And so we paid somebody, I don't know, $500 to help us get rolling on that. And so these are investments that you have to do on a small business that you maybe didn't do on a side hustle because it really wasn't.
Yes. And a quick note on that. I was going to do the SEO myself. I bought a book. I read it. I thought I understood it. Then I went in to do it. And all kind of the options had changed, and they make it very confusing, evidently on purpose. But so I hired an expert. I think it was like $480. So we'll keep everybody posted if that works. And then we do have a CPA that we use our taxes for every year. Now we have a bookkeeper. We just started that. That's like $50 an hour, which is a pretty reasonable price.
It's fabulous. I mean, she goes in and reconciles everything and down to the detail of, hey, you were missing a check. If there's a check, it doesn't say what it was for, so I couldn't allocate it. And I'm like, I don't have to do that. And
you don't have to think about it.
She's using QuickBooks.
So in summary, you should know what your overhead expenses are because you need to factor those into the cost of your goods and services.
Absolutely. Let's move to the next one. Pricing. This is the one that always comes up online. And so we've got some key points here, but people are always like, what are you pricing that at? And, how did you come up with that? we have what we call a shop rate, and you can see it down here. And James has calculated that for us. But I'm going to hit on the data here first. So for a side hustle, your pricing is often low and market driven. You may go, oh, I'm going to make this widget and I'm going to go on Etsy to see what they're charging on Etsy. You might look at a high and a low and you say, well, I'm going to try mid-range. And then your item isn't selling. And so you start dropping. And now all of a sudden you're close to the person who's the lowest.
Yeah.
And it's still not moving. So then you drop, you go free shipping. And so now you're like, dang it, I'm making this widget and I'm not making any money, right? And
Or you're
so-
making $5 an hour.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's kind of like the example over there, right? With the photographer that's in here. So underpricing can lead to burnout or unsustainable income. I see this so often in the groups. How do I price my stuff? I'm not sure. We did it ourselves. And
Mhm.
sometimes it's still an experiment. You know, you need what are the cost of materials? How long does it take to do? You know, the tool that you're using. I charge more now that I have a UV printer. If someone wants color, they're going to get charged more than they would if it was a laser.
Oh, sure. You have to resolve the cost into that. And then on another note, we've had a lot of circumstances where we would bid something out and it'd be like a high volume and we would be like, wow, I didn't realize it was going to take this long. Maybe I did one of them, but I didn't factor in maybe the fatigue factor, or, you know, you run into complications, have to do some rework or whatever. So obviously don't price it at, you know, an ideal rate. You know, if everything goes great, this is only going to take me 20 minutes on this product. Maybe it's, you know, put some scrap time in there, put at least 10% scrap time in there. Maybe you need to make 4 or 5 of them if you're going to make 500, for example.
Yeah. And, you know, just some other little nuggets that I remember from whenever we were in core side hustle mode. We were keeping every scrap of scraps. And it was like,
You mean
I had
the scrap
piles-
wood and stuff.
piles of
Yeah.
scrap wood. And well, what if somebody ordered just one name? I have a piece over here that is left from a bigger job. And then it was like I was spending more time looking through my scraps than just charging the right price. So if someone's going to buy something, charge for a reasonable amount of what that material cost. I mean, they're not expecting, you know, it to be given to them for free, but you need to charge your worth, right?
Or maybe that's not your right customer. I mean,
Yeah.
we did have instances where people would just load us up and we were like, if you're winning every single thing you're bidding on, you probably are bidding too low. Just, you know, you're going to have to go through your specific instance, but that's what we found to be true, right?
Yeah. And as we transition to small business, and James will hit that pricing stuff in a minute, but we found that the orders were coming in to the volume that it was too much. And so we said, look, we either have to hire somebody or raise our prices. So we raised our prices. And they slowed down because those cheap buyers then went after that Etsy side hustler that was, you know, doing the free shipping and the lowest price. But what happened is it slowed down the orders enough that I could now go and retool and do some new additional products to our product line, AKA learn how to use the leather stitcher. And now that's opened up my product line. And that's what's really taken our business to the next level. So by keeping your rates super cheap and low, you're doing a ton of orders, but you don't have time to go and learn something else to take it to a real business.
It's an opportunity cost for you, right?
Yeah. And didn't we do a podcast?
Yeah,
on
we
that?
did. And then you could have spent that time developing your business. And you may not want that customer who wants the absolute cheapest price. I think we've talked about this before, but at a high level, you can compete on cost, price, cost, service, or quality, you know, pick any two kind of thing. That's kind of the old joke, but you can't be the cheapest, have the highest quality and the highest service. It just doesn't work that way. And
No.
if it is, you'll end up going out of business. Now we charge a little more, but we also, you know, our deal is to deliver top quality and top service. That's very important to us. And we tell our customers that. So if people want, and we've told people that if you want the absolute cheapest price, then, you know, you can go to 4Print or, you know, go to, well, I guess I can't go to China now with the tariffs, but they can go.
They can
somewhere
do
else.
this
Yeah.
promotional companies that do high volume, low price
Yeah.
points.
Yeah.
Hit the small business.
Yeah,
pricing.
small business, we've kind of hit this, you know, it's more, the pricing is more strategic because you have to factor in your overhead that we just went through. If you have employee costs, you are going to have taxes. You should know what your profit margins are. And one thing that's not listed here that's really critical is cash flow. That's
Yeah.
the lifeblood of a small business. Every month you're going to spend so much, but you're also going to bring a certain amount in. You're funding this constantly. And if you can't upfront the cash, then you're going to need to fund your business. In other words, the inventory, the equipment to buy, the rental, then you're going to have to generate that free cash flow
Yeah.
to pay it every month to keep the business going until you get enough momentum. You can get scales and scopes of economy to have a true small business.
Yeah. And good point on that, because when we can, we make everything in shop or from America. But obviously, y'all know you have to buy some stuff from international suppliers. And when you do that, it's typically in 1,500 to 4,000, right? And
Yeah,
so there's where you're talking about,
Yeah.
We are already looking at what do we need for the holidays. And so, I know another maker that gets her boards made in a certain country, and has that design and sends it to them, and then she spends several $1,000s. And you need to do that 2 or 3 months, before the holiday, or you're not going to get it. And plus you got to see. So to your point, you got to have the capital. So have a shop rate. We have a target shop rate, as you can see on the bottom here. And when things come in and people ask us for stuff, we kind of go, what's our shop rate for that? What would that be? And we don't go, oh, this is what it is per item. We try to look at the whole big picture, because you might get to where you have so much business, you don't want to be doing every request.
Yeah. And I mean, you're going to have when you're a small business, you're going to have a standard catalog. You're going to know what your costs are. You're going to have some variability. So you have to factor that in, and you should know to produce, this widget cost me, $30. I'm going to sell it for $60. It takes me an hour. And so, if that factors in your overhead, you're making $30 shop rate per hour. So you just need to know that.
And a tip, if you get caught off guard, I was bad about this early. People would say, hey, I need a big old sign, and with this and that, how much does that cost? If you don't know, don't throw out a number that you really haven't thought about, because you get yourself into trouble. Just say, I need a pencil, put some paper to pencil to that. I'll get back to you. You don't need to answer them immediately.
Well, I think they do try. I think talking to you, they were trying to pressure you into giving.
I'm sure they try to get you to go lower. Okay, time commitment. The NT rolled around, but side hustles typically are part-time in addition to a day job. Your hours are typically flexible. You're actually doing it around any time that you have open, which is what I was doing. I was going to work full-time, and then I would come home and spend anywhere from 2 to 4 hours a day. And it got to be where I was doing 2 full-time jobs. And that's when we really turned it into a real business, and I had to quit. But it's typically done in complementary to another job. And it can be great if you have a fabulous job, or you like what you're doing and you're just wanting to have a little supplemental income. I think they say that on average, people get we just read this morning, 39% of individuals in the USA have a side hustle.
And the average amount was like $12,000.
Yeah, 12 to, I think it was $20,000 annually. So it's a nice little, bonus, right?
Or you could use it to fund your retirement. Maybe invest that money in your retirement, or you just grow your business until you can do full time.
And honestly, this podcast today is not about saying side hustles are not worth it. They are not. It's depends on where you are in your station and what you need to do.
Yeah, and you don't ever have to become a small business. Maybe you're going to keep it as a small business. Speaking of that, again, this is a full-time venture. When you're in a small business, you're making a full-time commitment, and that is a serious commitment. And as we've learned, you are filling multiple roles. Like we do the marketing, we make the product. Sometimes we do the delivery. We have to ship it. We have to pack it. We have to do the accounting. Now, we do have some of those people to help us out, because we found out, speaking of opportunity cost, it was better to pay that person $50 an hour. She's 3 times as fast as we would be. She does twice as good of a job. So
she's an expert in that domain.
Yeah, she is. And it's not a hard thing to do. You could make it a core competency, but we just don't enjoy it. And she does a great job, and then allows us to invest in our business. So that was a good move for us, I think.
And it's the same thing we just did with the SEO. And also when I first started Shopify, Andrew Farmer helped me out. I was playing around with it, and I'm like, I need to farm this out. You need to farm out what you're not good at and spend your time more wisely.
Yes.
Okay. Let me move this over here. Okay. Revenue and scalability. Side hustles is typically a limited revenue due to obviously some of the things we've talked about, right? Like your time constraints. And then also you may not have as big of infrastructure because you've only got 1 or 2 tools, or you're running it out of your, single bedroom, and you really, to take it to the full max, you could use 3 or 4 more lasers or whatever. So really the scalability, if you're going to run as a side hustle, you probably will keep it pretty small just because, just because of the throughput that you're getting out. As it says here, scaling can be rare without transitioning to a formal business. And that's really what happened to us. We naturally transformed into more of a business. And then I was running a business, but working 2 jobs. Because we had already put the infrastructure in place with the LLCs and all that. So,
Well, we didn't have the licenses, and we got approached by some schools, by some colleges.
yeah,
So-
but as far as the formal,
Yes.
of
Yeah,
the
we had
business.
an LLC because we wanted to isolate our risk,
money,
our
yeah.
liability. Yeah, because then in an LLC, they just summarize, right? In general, they can only take the money or the assets that are in the LLC. It separates it from your personal
say
assets.
why, in case you get sued or something.
Well,
goes
yeah, in
downhill.
case you get sued, they can only go after what's in the LLC. So if you had a shop or a truck or assets, inventory in the LLC, they can go after what's in that LLC. It's isolated.
So,
for
and
that.
begs a good question. A lot of side hustlers go to markets and they don't have insurance, and they're running it out of their personal income. So if a storm comes and the tent blows up and jacks somebody up, you could be sued, and they're going to come after your personal
Yeah,
asset.
you have a liability. Yeah.
So
You have
it's
a
another reason why, even if you're going to stay top of the side hustle / small business, you need to be covered with insurance.
insurance and LLC, I would strongly recommend. Okay, so small business, we talked about this, but you're getting into higher revenue, higher growth. You're going to generate income. You're typically relying on it for your livelihood, right? You have to pay your bills with that, so that's how you make your living, as opposed to working for a company. You're going to need robust systems. You're typically going to need employees or additional assets, like you run more than one laser at a time. You're going to have some formalized offerings like in a catalog, and they're going to be expanded. You're going to need to come out with new products every year too, because that's the lifeblood of your business. I think I said cash flow was, so there's 2 lifebloods. But you're going to need new products. I mean, we have customers all the time say, "Well, what's new? What's new?" And it's almost, in a way, it's a headache. In a way, it's great because it pushes us.
Because they've already bought what you
Yes.
had last year.
Yes. And then that last line, we do take a huge chunk of the money we make and invest it back in the business because we're in a growth phase and we see a strong return on that. So we'll continue to do that because we have to stay ahead of the curve. That's why we got the color printer. That's why we're partnered with Trotec.
And GS2 Awards.
And GS2 Awards. And then we've got, the strategic planning, which we're going to talk about more this year. And we need to do more of that. Sometimes it's hard. Sometimes we do get bogged down, I think, in the scrappy side hustle part. But you've got to have a plan, plan your work your plan.
Yeah. And, one thing just to add, because I told you we'd add little nuggets of our own experience. People say, Alisha, why do you have so many lasers? Okay, well, I'm selling some of them, but in general, the reason is I could have either hired people, work 24 hours, or buy more machines and put more product through those machines. So when I had, 3 and sometimes 4 lasers running at one time during the fourth quarter, I was able to turn more product than if I had one machine. So, you're going to be expanding your equipment set, right? And capabilities. So, if you are in the side hustle phase and you look at another shop and they're like, multiple lasers or whatever, don't always throw a stone, because there's a reason probably that they have those.
Or capability too. I mean, the Galvo is different
Yeah,
from the gantry. Obviously.
absolutely.
And you've gone through that. But the other thing is we had the product demand or the sales demand to allocate that. I mean, you were working 10, 11, 12 hours a day. And you're like, well, if I had another machine, I could be running a third machine now. So you did that. And now that we've got the Trotec, we're going to see, how fast that thing runs and see what we can turn through there. So very excited about that.
Yeah. So you got to think bigger. When you're in a small business, you think bigger picture, right? If I could get this well, here's a great example. The leather press. We first started with a 4-ton, and we talked about this morning.
Yeah.
A manual 4-ton. I paid, I think it was like $1,200 for it. And it was great. And it showed me that, hey, this leather embossing and cutting out coasters is a is going to be a thing, right? I like it. Well, then I was like, it's small. So I went and bought the 8-ton manual. Okay. Probably a dumb move, but that's okay. So now I had 2, and then I sold the 4-ton, got a little money back, and I really liked it. But then we thought, wow, we need to upgrade. We need the pneumatic 16-ton. And so we ended up buying that one, and I bought it direct from China, and I think it was like $3,500. But if I looked at those other things of how much I spent there, I should have just probably jumped up.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you got to kind of be thinking strategically, where did we want to take our leather business? And if we had sat down and probably said, let's really focus on this, I bet you we probably would have smartly gotten the pneumatic before getting all the other 2. So
we didn't really project that out.
No,
I mean,
but
it's called buy once, cry once.
yeah, but my point is, when you're a small business, you need to be more strategic in your thinking about what products you're going to develop and what tools you need to optimize the making of those.
Yeah, it's like you buy an F-150 and then you realize, you know, you want to pull cattle or horse. You can't pull that with the
one.
Yeah,
with
you're gonna need a Super
half-ton.
Duty. Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about the taxes and financial side of the house. For a side hustle, your taxes are a lot easier. Most people keep it on their personal income, so it's just kind of, some of y'all don't even tell the truth, but that's fine, whatever. You just keep it on your personal. Minimal bookkeeping. It's often tracked with spreadsheets. That's what we did early on. I think we actually did Excel for a while the first year, and we did about, gosh, that was 6 years ago. And my first year was like 25,000 in gross sales. The next year we jumped up quite a bit. And so we got QuickBooks because it was too much to manage. Plus I needed the invoicing system. But as you can see, as you're growing, you start needing systems. We needed an invoice system to track it, but we were using piggybacking with the accounting part of the QuickBooks.
Yes.
There may be some small deductions. I think we may have done that early on. Didn't we tell our CPA we've got a small business? And they were like, well, there's only certain things you can put there. And,
That's right. Yep.
But maybe we had mileage and a couple other things.
Yeah.
And speaking of, there's a couple great mileage apps that you can add to your phone that it tracks you where you're going, and you can tell it personal business. But anyway, talk about the small business side.
Yeah, it's a lot more complex on the tax obligation side. You've got to pay quarterly taxes. You do that for the sales tax.
Yeah, for the state.
You also need to pay self-employment tax. So when you work for an employer, they pay half of your Social Security and your Medicare. And when you have a company, I think it's different under an S Corp. We have an LLC right now. We'll probably move to an S Corp, but that's beyond the subject here, but the subject. But with an LLC, you've got to pay your own self-employment tax. So you're supposed to pay that quarterly as well. And that's like, I think 15.2 or 15.3%. So for every $100 you make of income, you're going to be paying $15.30. And that's on top of your income tax. So just keep that in mind. That's a significant portion. But if you move to a different tax structure, there's some advantages and disadvantages there. We do use a professional bookkeeper. We do have a CPA. We do have the accounting software, as you said, QuickBooks. And then but we do have, multiple deductions. We have a lot of equipment here, and then we have, equipment to work our property. Those are all write-offs. And I think we still have bonus depreciation now, which means you can write it all off in 1 year. So those are some things to consider. I would talk to your accountant before you buy equipment and understand what the tax implications are, and then you can manage that. There's also kind of a litmus test that if you have a viable business, you have to make a net income so many years out of 5 years. I believe it's 2 years out of 5 years. So that it's not a hard and fast rule or law, but it is a litmus test.
Yeah.
Again, talk to your CPA about that.
Yeah. And the nice thing about some of the software integrations with the assisted help you have, my bookkeeper can get into my QuickBooks. She can get into my Shopify. And then she can also get into, my CPA can get into my QuickBooks. And so all of that is integrated. So they can go and pull and look, and it just makes things so much easier. Let me go to the next topic. Okay, risk and liability. With the side hustle, it's really just personal liability. We talked about that a little bit while ago. If you are at a craft show and something happens. So you need to be very careful with that. And there really isn't a legal separation between the two. And so a lot of people do not get DBAs or anything like that. And so it's a high risk. You need to make sure that you understand what could happen if you go and there's something happens. And it's not just a show. you could be making some products for kids and a kid choke on it, and then you're going to get sued. And there's different requirements for making toys and stuff per the government, but you just need to be very careful. I've seen examples of people have sold wood signs to people that's fallen off their wall in a baby room and hit the crib, and then they try to come sue you for the glue that was used. We didn't want to have any issues with that, and sometimes we're careful about hanging systems. We will say you're responsible for putting the hangers on. Depends on what it is. So you got to be careful.
Big sign, yeah.
Yeah, but
so that has more risk with it, I guess.
But you also have lower risk because you're not doing as large of a scale, right? Maybe you're doing one or two things and not something that is going out to more people, more problems.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's the side hustle one. What about small business?
Small business, you've got some reductions and some increase to risk. You have reduced personal liability if you're structured in an LLC or an S corporation. That will protect your assets, as we discussed. And then on the higher exposure side, you've got larger operations. So there's more products you're selling, right? So every time you sell a product to someone, that's really an opportunity for an issue, potentially anyways. And then you've got employees. They could get hurt. They can sue you, right? They can do things, and then someone can go after you for what your employee did. So that's kind of scary. We've seen that like with UPS drivers.
Yeah.
Go after UPS. And then, you've got a physical location. So if someone comes on your physical location, a customer gets hurt, and you're going to need to make sure that you're covered with liability insurance. And we do have that. And as a matter of fact, we have to have so much coverage just to bid on certain jobs and to do work for certain companies.
Yeah, it kind of ties back to one of the other categories, which was the legal stuff and also the payments. If you want to work with a university, or if you want to work with some certain companies, they require you to have a certain level of insurance coverage, and also you have to pay royalty fees.
Bonded,
so
yep.
Now money's coming out in two ways. You got to have that insurance. I think our insurance is almost close to $600 a month now. So that's not chump change.
No.
I mean, now we do have a lot of assets and a big building and a vehicle on it, but you need to be realistic. It's not nothing. So you got to work that into your pricing. Okay, funding and investment. Side hustles are typically self-funded or bootstrapped, which is what we did from the beginning, with minimal startup costs. I did start with a separate account. I was at least smart that way. And I think I took out a loan from our personal for the Glowforge, and that was it. So
Right, yeah.
It was like, what do you call it? 6,500, I think is what it was. And then we paid it back, but we did keep that money separate, but a lot of people don't, right?
You want to keep your finances separate for sure. You need a separate account.
Yeah.
Your accountant's going to tell you that, because there's just no way to keep it straight otherwise.
And the other thing is it just helps. I mean, we're right now we're going to acquire another piece of equipment, and it can go up underneath that LLC structure and stay off of our personal, right? So It's kind of a good thing. They rarely seek external funding. Probably if you're trying to get a new laser, most people that are side hustles will use their personal loan. But right now we bought a truck and we got a loan for the LLC Pate Ranch and paid it off in a year. So it's like you need to operate just like it's a separate entity. So I'll just hand it over to you.
Yeah, smaller business, of course, you're going to have higher startup costs, and you probably are going to need a loan. I mean, if you work the small side hustle enough and you built up, and depending on how much equipment you have, maybe you don't. Maybe just like we built a small shop, we pay cash for that. But a lot of people are going to need a business, especially if you have a brick and mortar store. Most people aren't going to buy that to begin with. That's really, a lot of money. So there are grants available. Some people do get outside investors. They can go to their bank and get a loan. They can take a loan against their personal assets. And, they're going to need some kind of credit, ongoing credit. We do have business credit cards. We haven't taken out any loans, but we've just dumped everything.
We took a truck loan.
Well, yeah, we took the truck loan. We paid that off. We bought a piece of equipment for the property. We're taking a loan out against that. It was like 0% financing.
Alicia's getting a skid steer.
And then we had the tractor. We had a loan on that. That was 0% for 5 years. So there's some things you can do there. I mean, those are expensive items though. I mean, most people are not going to pay cash for those. And if you get 0% and it's not, it's the same price, whether you finance or cash, then it seems like it would make sense to just invest that money in your business, which is what we did.
But the thing is, if you're going to go to a small business or medium business, you will probably be taking loans out
Yeah.
for large purchasing of equipment.
But by then you should, I mean, it's your own comfort level, right? But you should feel very comfortable that you can pay that back in the terms that you've
Yeah.
taken.
Very true.
And you can project that out in a spreadsheet, basically.
Regulation and compliance side hustles have minimal regulatory requirements. They should be collecting sales tax if it's required in their state. So check with your state, and then report that income. Some do, some don't. You need to be careful with it. You could get on a radar and people will find out, and someone can turn you in. So we just always were legal about it and took the benefits that were there. So what about small business?
Yeah, I mean, you need to check with your locality, you know, the local laws and regulations. Also, it's going to vary state to state. There's federal regulations, and you're going to need a business license. This business is registered that we have. The building is registered under the business. There's different tax structure for that.
I'm seeing a lot of places are now requiring small businesses or makers to take those certificates with them. So
Okay.
like if you're at a show, you need to have a certificate that you're licensed to sell trademark stuff, and also that you have a resale certificate. Some of the vendors are requiring it now because there's so many shoddy people.
Have we been required for that?
We have a couple shows, yeah.
Okay.
Because they're trying to make sure everyone's buttoned up, because the last thing they want is for one vendor to do something wrong and then an accident happens and then people are getting sued. So,
and then you can have zoning laws, labor laws, you know, who you can employ, what you can build and make in certain areas. I mean, California has very restrictive zoning. So if you don't follow those things, of course, you can get fines, and certain states or federal, you know, they reinforce it harder than others. But
one thing that I'd bring up here is that some people in some states, I know California for one, there's really strict requirements around venting. Emissions and venting. So if you are going to think about, I want to shop and I want to open up and I'll have to vent out my machine, check with those facilities or those places that you're going to lease and the state
noise as well.
Make sure that you're going to be able to do what you want in that area that you're leasing out, because you may have to get a filter box or something like that to collect all that.
Or if you're running a business out of your neighborhood,
oh yeah,
they're going to restrict that. They're probably not going to want you to do porch pickup and be doing woodworking as a business in your garage because you're making noise and sawdust.
Yeah, we were doing that, and I'm sure some of our neighbors were annoyed, but they weren't very friendly to us anyway. So we had that 8-gallon air compressor running all the time.
Yeah.
But you know, that's starting to run its course because so many people started side hustles, and people don't like it. So just look at your area and see what you can do. We're getting close to the end here, and this is a summary tab. I always like little tables, well, probably because, you know, my background, but I like tables because it's quick and easy and you can
reference them.
Yeah, absolutely. So here we are. We're just going to go through. So for inventory, I'm going to talk to side hustle part and he'll do small business. You typically have low inventory made to order home storage. We, in our days, were doing the TJ Maxx and Home Goods runs to go find coasters. And IKEA, man, we'd go, hey, go hit Home Goods on your way home. I'm looking for this set, the same set of coasters that this client wants again. And so that's a big difference than whenever you start running as a small business.
It's not very sustainable. And, you know, on the small business side, you're going to have relatively high inventory. You're going to need to keep that in stock because, as you said, the customer calls you, they want that same thing, or you have it in your catalog. You better keep it in stock. It's hard to do a JIT kind of thing. We've got listed somewhere between the order of magnitude, you know, $500,000 and $100,000 in stock. I mean, we're towards the left of that, the lower end, but
you think
all the leather, yeah. So we've got quite a bit of inventory, but
I need to be tracking my inventory a little bit better. But I would guess I'm in the 60. Just from maybe. Anyway, I won't let you think about that too much. The reason why you need all the extra inventory is you may get a call that says, I need a quick turn for these portfolios, the same ones you did for me last year. And if you've got at least 10 or so on hand, I didn't have to go pay an extra shipping from JDS. So that's the mindset that you start doing.
Yeah, that's true. And we do get those. And, you know, you just have to do that playoff. If you have a 2-week lead time, then you're going to lose some orders, and that might be okay. It might not be okay. So that's the decision they have to make. The next one's investments.
Investments, low, you're typically bootstrapping it, just kind of going and finding and creating, you know, not a big strategic plan. You're using some of your own equipment that you have around your house. You know, maybe some of your woodworking equipment was not designated for business, but you're using it because you picked up a piece from your granddad or something like that. Go ahead.
Yeah. On the small business side, it's relatively high again. You're going to have dedicated equipment. You're going to have professional equipment, typically commercial equipment. You're going to need dedicated space. And it's, you know, it could be well over 200,000, which is what we have in the high end there.
Yeah.
And, you know, if you know, for a tip there, you should have a business plan to transition from that small business to the big business. Try to project all your cost out. You know, if you're going from a small business to a big business, or I'm sorry, from a side hustle to a small business, I would go visit a friend that you have or make a friend and say, could you show me what your operation looks like? I'm trying to project my operation out. And then you can make a list of those things. You can have a spreadsheet and understand what your startup costs are going to be, ongoing costs. And then you can develop a strategic plan to scale up from there.
Yep, that's a good one. Marketing, side hustle, you're probably doing free stuff, posting on your Facebook page, your business page. You should have a separate, my opinion, you should, even if you're a side hustle, have a separate business page for your side hustle in addition to your personal. I don't like mixing, but that's just me. So you could be marketing free posts. You might be paying for a little bit on Etsy. You may pay for ads on Facebook. Some people have had success, some haven't. We're doing ads on Etsy and Google. So, you know, just, and you've learned a lot about it. They're targeted. He's targeting people in the Houston area only, right?
And a couple other cities.
Yeah. So,
yeah, we've got a couple of cities, and that's the way they learn. That's what they, you know, the campaigns are by city.
Yeah. So you might not be doing a whole lot of spending in the marketing space, but once you get over to small business,
now you've got a professional doing that for you typically, unless that's your expertise or maybe you've got the time for it. But we pay for advertising, as you said. Now we have someone doing SEO optimization. You know, when you make that transition, you're going to need to look like a professional. So we have a professional logo. I think you paid to have that designed, right? The one that's behind me here,
Yeah.
or to my left now. And then we've got, what sites do we have? We've got Square.
We have Square for shows. We have Etsy, and then we have Shopify. So, you know, those are all subscriptions. And we paid money to have people help us to get them going, and we're maintaining them now. But you're going to start spending more money in that space. And, you know, an example of a medium-sized company, one of the companies that we work with, they're spending 30 grand a month on marketing.
Yeah, that's true.
So here we may be thinking, oh, that's a lot of money. I mean, you know, where we are, it's way a lot of money where they are. But if you want to grow and scale, you just kind of have to do it. So looking at the customers, for the side hustle, it may be smaller. It's probably typically more D2C, so direct to consumer. You're doing a lot of that via texting or email. We remember those days. Hey, Alisha, do you have anything that I could pick up by tomorrow? Or, you know, I have a wedding. Do you have any thoughts? And so that's kind of the deal. You're being the creator for them, or they have an event they need to go to and they want to know what you have in stock. And so it's a lot of hand holding.
A lot of one-to-one. You have one customer, one product, right?
One customer, one product. And then you, as you're growing, scaling in the side hustle business, you start doing where you've got, what is our analogy? We said you're using 500 customers that are spending $50.
Okay.
Well, you'd rather have 50 customers that are spending $500. So you need to flip the script there, right? But your customers and the way you engage with them is a lot different than whenever you get to a small business. So go ahead and keep that one.
Yeah, I mean, your customers, like we're trying to transition to B2B and get larger orders, so there's scales and scopes of economy there. And you still have small businesses that do smaller orders, but a lot of times I've noticed they'll say free shipping with $200 or more. They're trying to push their customers to make more than just a $50 purchase, because that, you know, they have all these resources, and if they can scale them, then it helps with their income. There's a customer relationship software you can get for that. Are you familiar with Zoho?
No, but you know, we work with a client who uses Monday, and that system is very nice because They can put their order in. I see their order. We can communicate through that Monday tool. I can, attach links, attach,
Get approval for the order.
assets from the Adobe Illustrator goes through that system. So as you grow your business and you're in small business mode, your systems are upgrading and the way you're interacting with your customers is different. And if you stick to the emails and texts, you're going to lose because you mess up stuff. You get stuff wrong. You get typos and they don't approve and they don't really look and you don't have traceability. And so then they go, well, you messed up and you eat the cost. So you have to grow as your business grows. Hiring, you're typically a solo shop when you're in the side hustle. You might have a spouse that helps you or a kid, but it's
maybe when you're lucky.
Yeah, you're lucky. In small business, you may still just be 2 people or just 2.
And contractors, like we've got.
We've
got the accountant, we have the CPA, we have the SEO, as we mentioned.
And you might hire
freelancers.
Seasonal help, right? One thing that we typically don't do, James doesn't like to tell people it's just us. We like to say our staff.
Well, we do. We bring in part-time people.
Yeah.
So just have a,
professional mode.
Yeah. I mean, you're working towards that anyway. So try to project that image to your customers, in a genuine sense.
Yeah, exactly. Technology, whenever your side hustle, it's usually basic. You don't really feel like spending money. Google has some nice applications that are built in. I know I'm speaking at a conference in Dallas pretty soon. We're going to be talking about systems, but Google has a form that you can design for pick lists for people to order from, and they can add customization. We started out with that very early because it was free. In some instances with my realtors, I still use that because they're used to it and it's easy. But then as you graduate, you really need more robust systems.
Yes.
So, and that's probably my side of the house. So I'll kind of hit on it, but you really want professional software. So we use QuickBooks. I use Shopify. I use the Adobe Creative Cloud for the design. Then we use Pirate Ship, which integrates Shopify, Etsy, and into all my shipping. So now you're starting to see these softwares working together. If I didn't have that, it would probably be challenging because you'd be copying and pasting a lot of stuff. So hopefully technology will keep moving for us small businesses. There's not a lot of ERP systems or CRM systems. So that would be kind of a nice thing. Let me do this so I can go to okay, compliance and small business, minimal to none. There's a little bit of tax reporting, but some sales tax if you're which you should be tracking it per your state. That was the main one that I can remember.
Yeah, and we covered the small business. You're going to have to pay taxes quarterly. You're going to have to pay self-employment taxes, income taxes. You did list out a site there, sba.gov, that you can go to, and then TurboTax has a small business application.
Yeah, and honestly, to get the dedicated business account, which is a checking account that is not your personal, it was very easy. I think it was like $200 minimum to open with your regular account. So there's no reason not to do that.
And we have a separate credit card. Just keeps everything separate.
Just keeps it all. That was a smart move that we did because we didn't have to mix it. And then this last one is space. You can run a side hustle from home, which means not a whole lot of.
Or your she shed.
Or your she shed in your backyard, or your what are they called? The he ones. He house.
He house, yeah.
There are people that are running full businesses out of their house. It just depends on your situation, if you have the room for it.
Or you could just be a services. I mean, maybe you're doing SEO and so you can do that out of a spare bedroom. But for a small business, if you're in the maker space, you're likely going to need a dedicated space. So, we built a shop. Some people rent them. If you've got buildings could go into the millions, obviously. I mean, corporate real estate has, commercial real estate has gone way up for whatever reason. I guess there's big supply and small demand, but so you could easily, build a dedicated shop and get really high. I mean, there's all these companies that specialize in it. Go online, look in your area. I mean, they make these metal shops. They make the pole barns. You can do some of the work. We did some of the work ourselves and save some money. So that's, just run the numbers and figure out what it takes. But by the time you make that investment, you're making a pretty serious investment. So you need to kind of be all in when you do that, right?
Yeah. And there's other things you need to think about. Do you want it on site? Do you want it, 10 minutes away so that you get in the car and leave and check out? I know some people have a hard time cutting it off.
Well, there's pluses and deltas. I mean, we have ours on our property, so it's good because we don't have to, we can walk to it, but it's bad because it's always there. So,
Well, and we've talked about if we hire employees,
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
want employees right next to my house,
yeah.
Yeah.
So
So
we may have to move eventually, and we've thought about that, and we're still thinking about that. But those kind of decisions you should think about way in advance, and then you can start to form, get more information.
all right, got one last slide. And it's really the takeaway. If you're going to transition from a side hustle to a small business, it's really something that you strategically need to sit down, think about, write down. Are you really wanting to put forth that time? You need to set some legal structures in place. It's just an example. There's online sources. If you don't know a lawyer, I think we used LegalZoom or something
We did
to do our LLC.
LLC, yeah.
Back then, I think it was what, $400 or something, but
Yeah.
it was easy to do. I would recommend getting a tax resale certificate even if you want to stay side hustle, because you can get benefits from getting wholesale pricing for material. You'll want to get some insurance quotes if you want to get to be running as a real business. I know people are always asking, who do you get your insurance from? We used a broker here in the Houston area. What was the broker's name?
I
Ball?
forget, we can mention it.
It doesn't
later.
matter.
Yeah.
Anyway, and they brokered a deal for us, and I think we're with Hartford or something. You need to calculate your overhead and your sustainable prices. What does that look like? I didn't do it for this podcast, but if I wrote down everything that is a must do every month, payments, like the phone, the insurance, the whatever, are you ready to swing that, right? Be ready and aware of what that's going to be. Have your accounting tools in place. You need to be buttoned up there because it can get very overwhelming when you're purchasing and spending a lot. And then test those higher prices gradually, to see if you can pull those pricing volumes. Again, like I said, we raised our prices to slow down some of the people buying, and it did do that, but it also gave us bandwidth to go create higher end products that now, our most expensive things are what's selling more than those smaller things. So any key steps, takeaways before we close out?
No, I think you nailed it. I mean, you really need to project out those costs, make sure you're ready to make that jump. And I would make sure that, for us, it was just a comfort level. So you were working a full-time job, plus you were almost working full-time on the side hustle. So it definitely made sense. We projected out the revenue. I think I was probably surprised on the capital side. We spent a lot of money on capital equipment, but every time you would talk to me, you would say, "Hey, I'm running one machine. I'm sitting," and I would watch you. I would just kind of, you didn't know, it was a little creepy. Probably I was studying you and watching you and taking notes, but there was a lot of idle time. So I'm like, "Hey, it seems like you're waiting a lot." "Yeah, I'm waiting on the equipment." I was like, "Well, that's not good." And then when you get another laser, so we got a second one. And one time you were running 3, gantries plus the gavels. That's a lot. That's a lot to run at once. So you have that skill and you have the ability, but we had the orders, so we just filled them. So it made sense. So we were able to pay that back quickly, but we always kept track of our cash flow, and we only took out, and this is just for us again, but we only took out the loans that we were very intentional and conscious about, the truck, the tractor. Now we got the track steer, but those are big pieces of equipment that are frankly expensive, and we got, 0% interest. So I was okay with that. That's just it's a personal decision you have to make.
Yeah. And I think, in summary, to get back to the original question that he and I had of why do we charge so much for our stuff? It's because of what we just walked through, right? I mean, everything that was on the small business side is an add up. So it adds up. So we need
it's overhead.
charge,
It's resolved in every product, but I think our quality is really high. I know our service is high. And then we cater to customers that need high quality, high service, and they're willing to pay a little more. It's not like we're twice as much as everyone else, but we're definitely not the cheapest. And we tell them that, look, you're getting this service and this quality for a reason, because we made an investment and we like to partner. So we're trying to get these customers that are repeat customers, and you should be measuring their overall, their lifetime sales, so to speak. Not just, don't think of it as selling a used car. You're not selling them just one little widget. You want to earn their business for the future.
Correct. And the other thing that I'll say, James, is that what's really important in here, and I've said it before, and I don't know if they picked up on it, is your outward shingle. If you're really going to run as a small business, your outward shingle needs to look like you are. So we saw a big difference whenever we spent a significant amount of time on our Shopify or our
Yeah.
website. We've got people, I'm surprised. I can go look in live view and see that, 68, maybe 120 saw it one day and and they may not buy it, but they're looking at us. So you need to look professional and polished, spend the money on getting some of those things put in place so that you look good, right? And you don't necessarily have to do that as a side hustle. You can, but you may not.
Yeah, a lot of times it's word of mouth as a side hustle. Like somebody sees a cool cup and they're like, well, where did you get that cup from? And then your overhead is so low, you could probably beat Etsy's pricing and just
Yeah.
operating out of your living room or your garage, right? Which is, and I think it's fine to do that. You just have to decide and be conscious when you're going to make that step. It's a big step. It's an inflection point. It's not like, oh, it's going to cost me 10% more to operate. You're going to be looking at 20, 30%.
But your returns are also,
if you get the volume,
if
that's
you get
right.
the volume,
Yeah,
your
yeah.
returns are also exponential. So, you may be taken away from this podcast. Oh my God, so much work, so much.
Yeah.
Is it going to, the payoff? The payoff has been good for us. And for many other businesses that I know, their payoff is good. You just don't hear it because no one's going to brag about it because you shouldn't. But you need to, if you're going to invest, you need to really invest the time and the dedication, and the payoff can be very good. So closing comments.
No, you hit it. I mean, you mentioned the mentor. That's probably a good idea. Go and see somebody who's running an actual small business. If you're going from a side hustle, and make sure you understand what those expenses are going to be. And then our lesson learned, factor in the capital expense. And for us, again, it was kind of easy because we could continue to grow our business with that. And we
Yeah.
can talk more about that and later, kind of some of these mental models you can use to make these decisions. But best luck to you. And I hope they got a nugget or two they can apply in their business.
I hope so too. And a final comment from me, if you can find a maker mentor, that's great. I know when we were transitioning from side hustle to business, May was really kind of a back and forth maker mentor. Both of us would ask each other questions like, how are you doing this? What are you doing there? And, how are you stopping? I will never forget. I said, how are you slowing orders? She said, I take slots. So 1 month, I'm only going to do X amount of signs.
That was a great comment.
And then when that fills up, then I tell people you'll slide to next month. And so it made people think, wow, she's got high demand, but she's controlling that income, that throughput coming to her in a professional way. So find another friend that is in this that you can bounce ideas from. I think that's very helpful. And you can, hey, I'm thinking about investing in this supplier overseas. What do you think? Have you used them before? If you can find somebody that you can do that with, that is great. And I guess in closing, the only thing I want to do is kind of share. We have some new sponsors. I'm going to take our picture off real quick. We had some new sponsors come in the last couple of weeks. So GS2 is who we signed up with as a partner, and we're super excited about them. And the double bonus is that Trotec is a part of that. So I'm excited to be working with Braden and Allison, and you'll see a lot of talk about awards as we go forward because we're really wanting to transition our business into that. And then we've had two that we've been working with, Phantom CNC systems. They've got great CNC systems. That's who we're using for our CNC here in our shop. And they've also rolled out some new lasers in their product line. So take a look at them. They also have a lot of just shop equipment like vacuums and
accessories. Yeah.
Things like that.
Vacuum systems, I think by and far the best value for CNCs if you shop the functionality and speed.
Yep. And then Haotian, they're my sponsor for my Galvo bank. I think I've got 5 or 6 machines from them. So you'll see we're working with them, and just super excited for our sponsors. They support our purpose, our Facebook group, and our podcast. And you'll see us as we go around to some of these events and shows. We're speaking at Lightburn again, and then at the event in Dallas, the Next Level event, and then I think there's another one in the fall. Oh, we got another one. Trotec is doing the Grand Prix, so that's in May. So we'll make sure those are visible out there. But y'all have a great weekend, and keep hustling and keep running that business, and we'll see you in the Facebook groups.
Cheers.